As the 80s had finally gone rogue, two lovely young girls named Minogue, Dannii and Kylie, left us all smiley, as they both do in this episode. Newsflash people, the year is 1990, the month is March, and the week is ending the 25th. Let's get into it, you're gonna love it. Let's begin with the section that was let out of immigration detention by Andrew Giles, and boy does he regret it. Hello and goodbye, where we look at the fresh new faces and wave bye to the retiring. And new to the top 10 this week is Love and Kisses by Kylie's younger sister, Danniminogue. Her first single, it comes up from 13 to 6, bound for number 4. It replaces the former number 1, Jamie's Got a Gun, which falls from 6 to 11. Biggest hit coming onto the charts this week is I Don't Know Anybody Else by Black Box, who should be congratulated in having stretched their meagre vision to 3 hit singles. It'll go to number 6. The biggest hit to leave is the former number 2, I Feel the Earth Move by Martika. And the next number 1, and it'll be a while before it gets there, is at number 12 this week, Bored Luau Pa, a song that could have been written about me, by Crappiest Tattoos. Warp your brain around that anagram if you can, the answers are in the end panel. After 77 editions of this series, I generally find that in starting a top 10, 10 is indeed the best place to start, and to that end, I offer those German silly billies Milli Vanilli, with Blame It on the Rain. Back in episode 68, we had a bit of fun at the expense of the ultimately tragic fraudsters. Looking at it all from a bit of a distance, MV's big problems is that all their hit records sound pretty much the same to each other, so I can't really say if one is any better or worse than any of the other singles. The people, however, did vote on this one, getting it only to number 5 and spending a mere 14 weeks on the charts, half of which were in the top 10. 9 is Sydney's Peter Blakely, a man Ahmed Erdogan once called the finest white soul singer he'd ever heard, who slips from 7 with his groove-laden Crying in the Chapel, down from its high of number 3. Jolly good run of 22 weeks saw this become the 3rd biggest Australian-based hit of the year. 8 is that band I Love Not to Love, Midnight Oil, with their economically unsound hit Blue Sky Mine. This was to be their last venture, and a very modest one it was too, into the top 10 for 5 years. Having debuted at number 10 a couple of weeks back, it'll hang around at number 10 again next week and thereafter drop away pretty quickly. It's beloved institution Elton John at number 7 with Sacrifice, his first ever UK number 1. EJ was in the stretch of his career where he was making safe, formulaic albums that all sounded pretty much the same and popped up a mid-level hit single here and there. The album Sacrifice comes from is a true CD-era artifact. The songs are all in general 45 seconds to a minute too long. The opening track, Durban Deep, is the worst offender. Sacrifice itself sounds like it was recorded on a Yamaha Portasound and just sleepwalks along. Of course, in 2022 it was remixed by, now is it PNAU or Panau? I don't know. And spent 5 weeks at number 1, but that was a pretty hard remix. Its 1991 incarnation is pleasant, but no more. And while one of the things that can be said for Sleeping with the Past is old Hercules is in pretty good voice, this one doesn't really support that. Dannii Minogue, the older and dare I say lesser of the Minogue sisters, makes her debut at 6 with Love and Kisses. It's not an inspiring piece, it lacks the hooky sophistication of Kylie's work with Stock Aitken Waterman, and Dannii lacks Kylie's spunky confidence. She's quite an accomplished actor and TV host, and the music is more of a side hustle that served her well enough for a dozen top 30 hits down the years. Time for the trade-up, where we look at the records that didn't make the top 10, largely because local record buyer is an idiot, but probably should have. And this week there's one obvious contender, Debbieharry, whose Sweet and Low is a really underrated little blast of fun. It only lasts 5 weeks on the charts and made it all the way up to number 30. Debbie slurs and purrs her way through it most charmingly, and I think it would have been an ornament to the top 10. Number 5 this week is Milli Vanilli again. It's rare we get a band with 2 songs in the top 10 at the same time, but here we have it. It's only the 7th time in this series we've seen it happen. I think what this week is revealing is, sadly, that once you strip away the scandal and death from Milli Vanilli, there's no other story. The music has no soul, no remarkability about it. Well, we're really banging through them this week. 4 is the big-lunged and smouldery-eyed Canadian alannahmyles with her tribute to Elvis's favourite pomade, Black Velvet. Holding in this week at 4 for its 3rd straight week after peaking at 3, this spent just over 5 months on the charts and was the 13th biggest seller of the year. Number 3, down from 2, is Lindaronstadt with Aaron Neville and the smooth AOR of Don't Know Much. A sadly misused talent for much of her career, Ronstadt seemed to know she had a knockout voice, but allowed herself to be fed material and to be recorded in settings that so often did not flatter her. By the mid-80s she started to get it together and began a mad, eclectic, zigzagging dash across styles. She's often associated with Warren Zevon's songs, but this one comes from the pen of those most classical of hitmakers, Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil. This one hung around for 22 weeks, half of them in the 10, but it was the last time we ever heard from Lindaronstadt on our charts. In a savage indictment of local record buyer as an idiot, Lindaronstadt only ever actually made the top 10 in Brisbane 2 times. Number 2, the second best, the one that fell at the gates, is this channel's favourite bellowing oaf, Michaelbolton, for his 3rd straight week. How am I supposed to live without you? Well, with all the hits he was having at the time, we weren't going to get the pleasure of finding out just how for a while. Massively overblown buffoonery. This gives power ballads a bad name, and it assaulted the airways for 25 long weeks, becoming the 7th biggest hit of the year. Facty time. Blue Monday by New Order is the biggest selling 12-inch single of all time, clocking over 3 million copies. Sharks have been around 350 million years longer than the rings of Saturn. To obnubulate is to cause something to become darker. It's a freestyling fact frenzy. It's Val's fantastic world of fact. Biggest riser this week is Peter Blakely, whose First Time Ever I Saw Your Face is up from 37 to 27 on its way to not much better. Biggest faller this week is that bonza little Aussie Sheila, Kylieminogue, who falls from 27 to 33 with Tears on My Pillow. Biggest debutante is I Don't Know Anybody Else by Black Box, which is in at 20. It'll go top 10 eventually. The longest running song on the charts is those Millivanilli guys, again with Don't Forget My Number, hanging in after 31 weeks. Is it time to use the phrase Millivanilli mania yet? Number 1 in the USA is One More Try by Timmy T, a song that I'd never heard before and really wish I still hadn't heard. In the UK it gets worse. I guess we can forgive the stonk by Hale and Pace because it's a charity record, but it is utterly moronic. Nick Lowe appears to play bass on it. His hair is magnificent. Me, as a bald guy, if I could have any rock star's hair, I would have Nick Lowe's. Or Jimi Hendrix's. This time last year we were moovalating and groovalating to Madonna's Amazing Like a Prayer. And next year we were doing pretty much the opposite, to Julian Lennon's soporific Salt Water. And the number 1 album in town this week is Sineadoconnor debuting in the top spot. Okay, for this week's special, I thought that being a hip and informed individual, and because what I originally planned here hadn't worked out, I would provide a quick overview of 2024 so far and thumbnail review each single to hold the number 1 top spot so far this year. Now, as I'm doing this on the 10th of June 2024, it'll be hopelessly out of date by the time you hear it, but I needed something to fill the gap. Well, it's time for the number 1 hit, and to introduce it, it's the dude from Rwanda who makes the drums thunder. Number 1 this week is Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor, on the 6th of its 8 weeks on top. Biggest hit of the year. If we do a top 40 based on this series so far, it would come in at number 12. Probably so low because unlike a lot of hits, it has no climb through the 10 to the top. It debuted at 37 on the 10th of February and then went straight to number 1 the next week, and it only ran 19 weeks on the charts. It was a perfect storm, a great song. Prince's version would have been a huge hit too, a one-of-a-kind performance and a perfect video. It all got terribly sad and dark for Sinead after this, too sad and dark to talk about here. And people are worth remembering for far more than just a hit record, but then, if this is going to be your memorial, what a wonderful one to have built. And there we have it. That's how the cow ate the cabbage for the week ending February 11, 1990. It wasn't so terribly dreadful, was it? No. All that remains for me to say is that the good lords are willing and the creeks don't rise. We'll be back here with a new instalment next week. Gish.